Welcome to The Prosperity Practice. The Prosperity Practice. Our personal take on what it takes. Push, challenge, light the fire. Do not chase prosperity. Rather, be prosperous. Welcome to The Prosperity Practice with your host, Brandon Hanley.
Looks like we made it.
Ready to go.
Five, four, three, two, one. Hey there, prosperity practitioners. I am on today with Armando Cruz. You may have caught Armando on over at Fatherhood for the Rest of Us. If not, and this is your first introduction to Armando, let's check him out. He is a connoisseur of experiences, husband, father, adventurer, best-selling author, ultra-marathoner, lifestyle physical therapist, and legacy coach. Armando helps growth-minded married men live happier, more connected, and more fulfilled lives through his immersive coaching program that guides them to show up powerfully in their marriage, in their health, in their business, and in creating a purposeful legacy. Armando's unique approach helps stretch away the clutter both internally and externally that stops men from showing up daily as the greatest and grandest version of who they are for themselves, their family, and their legacy. He is the creator of the Cleanse and Renewal program, the Modern Man Virtual Summit, and the Rich Man Experience. He's the co-owner of Cruz Country Fitness and Physical Therapy with his wife, Christian. I wanted to get the Rich Man Experience in there because I think that's important. He is also the proud dad of 3 amazing children and has been married for over 11 years to his beautiful wife, Christian. Armando, thanks for popping on here today. And, I like to just always start these off with what can we do to celebrate you and what's going on in your life today?
Having me here is good. It's a celebration. I get to hopefully add value, and we'll get to have meaningful conversation. That to me is one of the things that I find most valuable in life, is being able to have meaningful conversation and connection with people. Because I feel that, as men, and even men and women, these relationships and actually going below the surface, going deeper, is not happening as much. And to have these conversations where not only other people can benefit from it, but for us, just you and I, be able to go in there and just have a genuine conversation, I think is always powerful and could be quite valuable.
Absolutely. No, amazing, right? And our last conversation, Armando, I think it was like 2 hours, right? So we'll try and keep it a little bit shorter this time. Look, man, I want to celebrate something for you. You guys dodged that storm down there, right? So we've got Dorian that just went through. We were just talking about that before here, and you and your family made it through unscathed, and I think that's pretty awesome, right? I think that's something that I'm going to celebrate that for you, right?
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Armando has agreed to kind of join us here today with the premise, and the premise hasn't changed, so it's not like I just set you up, Armando. But with the premise of we talk a lot about like kind of law of attraction type of stuff here, and on the prosperity practice, and we look at that. But it's not just law of attraction and woo woo. There are transition pieces, right? That we bridge. And I think that a lot of people are in one camp or in another, right? Like it's all science, and people are like it's all woo woo, right? But I think that there are some really easy to see pieces that overlay, and if you kind of allow for it and look for it, you see it. And what most of you don't know, and I don't even know if Armando knows. I think he does. I told him he was one of the first people that introduced me to the RAS, right? And if you don't know what RAS is, that's the reticular activating system, and in law of attraction. But Armando was the first person to show me that, and I'm more of the woo woo camp, right? Just because sometimes I like the mystery. If I'm, sometimes I don't know, man, that's just how I am. That's how I was raised, and I like it. But when you see the science of it, sometimes it takes it away. And I was a little upset for a little bit, Armando. I'm not going to lie. But I pulled myself back together, and I was like, well, let's look more into this. And how does it play its role? Let's talk to some people who aren't familiar with RAS, as it were, RAS, the reticular activating system. How would you define it?
Right. I think the best way to actually define it is to give you an example.
Sure.
Let me give you this one. Have you ever went and bought a car that you had never seen, and now you're driving down the road and you see that car everywhere?
Absolutely.
Like everywhere. I remember our car was in the shop and I had to get a rental car. And I got this Dodge. It was a pickup truck. I forgot, which is the Dodge pickup truck that's famous.
Dakota Ram.
The Dodge Ram. And I know that it was out there, but I never noticed it. And I'm driving this truck. I'm like, man, this is pretty cool. And I look around. I'm like, where did all these trucks come from?
Right.
And it's like they've always been there, but our brain is a pattern-seeking machine. And at its core, the reticular activating system is kind of the captain behind that. It's constantly looking for these things, sameness, or it's looking for things that are going to kill us. I mean, at the end of the day, our brain is designed to keep us safe.
Yeah.
So it needs to pick up on patterns with the purpose of things not killing us. And then it kind of goes down from there. Okay, well, if things aren't going to kill us, is this something, back in the day, is this a plant that was good for us and nobody died? Okay, great. Now this one looks very similar. Let me try this one.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's the role, and that's essentially it. It's to create pattern. It's to pick up on patterns, and essentially keep us safe.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. And I love that. Right. The blue car syndrome is kind of what you're talking about. Right. That's also speaks to the RAS. Just saw Tony Robbins last week, or maybe it's 2 weeks ago now, and he did this thing where you kind of close your eyes, and then he says, everybody search the room for the color blue, right? Because now your filter's been set, right? And that's how I look at it. So your filter has been set to look for the color blue. It's going to pick up all the color of blue, and that's all it's looking. That's all it can see. Basically, you set it to say blue, right? And you look all around, and you're even picking up like purples or even like some other color variants. Maybe like a not quite black. Navy, all hues of it. And the funny thing is like, okay, well, now scan the room for red, and there's so much red there you didn't even notice before because you were only you were like pinpricked, right? You had like this tunnel vision, as it were, on that. And this is the point of the prosperity practice, is to kind of open up your vistas, as it were, to set your filters to more than what you're already aware about. And I think that it's funny. You're down in Florida, right? That's where Christopher Columbus landed, right? Am I wrong?
Down south, around there.
Close enough, right? Yeah,
close enough.
Close enough. And he tells a story about, or they tell the story. History tells stories about how the natives didn't see the ships as they came on the horizon, because they've never seen them before. How could they believe in something that they've never seen before? Or right? How can you believe in something that you don't have a concept of? And what do you think about that? Right? Like, do you need to kind of have a concept and a belief in something in order to see it as it goes to RAS?
I believe that when you're looking at something like this, whenever you simplify, you understand that you are rarely getting it all, right? We simplify so that we can grasp it and use it as a tool. But as your understanding grows, your ability to use that tool for more things helps. So to answer your question, do you need to believe? I think the question was, do you need to believe in order to see, or do you need to see it first before you believe? Right. It doesn't have to be either or. There has to be instances where if you do, like when they asked, I think it was the example was with Steve Jobs. Nobody said they needed a phone that was your computer, right? That needed to replace pretty much everything. he had a vision for it that nobody could see. So if he would have asked, people would have been like, no, I don't need that.
Right.
My phone is to call people. That's it.
Right.
But until he shared that vision and now all of a sudden be able to make it a real thing for people to actually handle, very different. And we all operate very different. There are some people who are visionaries,
right,
who can see what has not yet been seen,
right,
and bring it to life. We need those people.
Right.
But at the same time, we also need the other people, the people that need to be skeptical at the beginning, because they keep us visionaries grounded a little bit.
Sure.
Because if not, then we kind of go the other extreme. I say we because that's kind of the way I think. I'm the other way. Fortunately for me, my wife is the one that keeps me grounded in that way. And so we form this relationship of, I help her see some things that haven't been, but then she actually helps me formulate a vision that's stronger because she starts asking me all these questions. But but how about this? You didn't think about that. And I'm
absolutely. No, I love that. Right. Similar story here. Right. But I think that, and not to call one of you negative, but in for any electrical circuit to happen, right, you need to be grounded. Right. There's, and I like to think about it that way. Like, so you certainly need to be grounded. Let's talk about and vision is a big part in the woo-woo side, right? Quote unquote. Right, like vision boards and whatnot. But let's translate that into something that the middleman's can understand. Right, like your wife's going to come up to you and be like, Armando, what do you mean you have a vision? Tell me about your vision. Fine, I've heard all your visions before, and I've got these questions. Right, but explain vision for some people that maybe aren't familiar with it.
Okay, actually, let me take a step back for a second, because you referred to the woo versus the science, but remember, all science used to be woo-woo at some point.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We travel back in time and I show them this phone.
Yeah, they might not let you live.
Right. Right. So understand that woo is a direct reflection of our understanding at that moment.
Right.
We don't have the facts or the backing or even sometimes the proper words to use to describe and I don't know, organize
absolutely
what woo is until we do, and then it doesn't seem so woo anymore.
Absolutely. And look, that's this conversation, right? And that's why I think this is kind of fun because there's a lot of science proving out right now, how our internal emotions really do travel externally and how it does impact those, not even just like right around us, or how it does impact our body chemistry, right? I mean, right? That's up your alley, right? Let's talk about it. So let's talk vision first, though, right? So 100% understood. Woo-woo is kind of like this, the definition we give to something that we think is there in existence in a way, but we haven't been able to properly translate it for everybody to understand. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. And remember, the brain seeks patterns. Change is a pattern we don't like because it's inefficient for our brain.
Sure.
Which is why when you have somebody now say this woo-woo stuff, and again, don't get me wrong, some of it is way out there. I don't necessarily believe it all. But part of it is the people who are kind of set in their ways, if you want to call it, is because of that. It's change is not something that is agreeable to us because what we know breeds more safety, more prediction.
Sure.
Our brain is constantly looking for that. So this is from a neuroscience perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, the brain is a very intensive instrument, right? Like the brain takes a lot of energy to say, to always be trying to make a decision. Is it okay? Am I going to live in this instance or not? Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always trying to keep you alive. So to your point, vision. What is vision?
Sure.
Vision is, I think one of the ways I really like to look at vision is creating the reality that you like before you fit. So mentally creating the reality before you can physically make it. It's the design. It's you have to, if you were an architect and you're gonna make a house, you have to envision what the house looks like before you can draw the blueprints and actually start putting pen to paper.
For sure.
You don't just start putting pen to paper and then, usually That's not how it goes.
Yeah, well, my houses look like that. You should see some of my past tree houses. It's always good to kind of sketch it out first, right? I mean, right? I mean, you just go out there with a hammer and some nails. And I'm just going to tell you, it's fun. But like, if you have like a blueprint, like Armando's talking about, a little bit more of a vision, then you've got a visual construction of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Now, quick for me too, right? How would you differentiate then vision and dream?
Well, okay, so semantically, they can be different.
Okay.
But some people, and this is where I think oftentimes we start often fighting or arguing with people because we miss this part.
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand each person's definition of that.
Absolutely.
So when you say dream,
Sure.
what do you mean?
Right,
When
right.
you say vision, what do you mean?
Right.
So if you're asking me, how would I make the distinction? For me, as I look at it,
Sure.
I see a vision as the design that I would like to create in my life, whereas a dream doesn't necessarily have the same commitment. In other words, it could be something that you literally just dreamed up, but I feel like it lacks a little bit of the intention behind it. One may be more sporadic, whereas one is more intentional.
Okay.
That would be the difference if I was going to say that there was a difference.
Sure,
So
sure.
I could make the argument that they're the exact same thing.
Right. No, and that's part of it, right? Like, so, because I recently went to see Jack Canfield, and there was at the group at the table there. I said, how would you break apart, a goal, a dream, and a vision, right? And some of these steps, and they're all important. And it's just like you're saying, how does Armando break it down? How, if we are having a conversation, well, I'm going to need to know from you.
Right.
When you say, "Oh, I've got a dream, dude. Let's go do this. Let's go do this." We're like, "What do you mean you've got a dream?" Right? And you just told me, right? And all right. Well, now we're gonna quote unquote vision cast, right? Now we're gonna expand it. So maybe dreams like the precursor to vision, right? Or maybe dreams even like the cherry on top of the vision, right? Where you've got like kind of like these tangibles in your mind, and the conversation that we're having right now, vision is kind of tangible, right? Vision is something that there's a little bit more integrity and structure to. And then for the sake of this, the dream is like maybe like the additional, wow, if we could just throw this in here somehow. I'm not committed to this piece, but man, if this were to land at our feet, that would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
I would feel good with that connection. But again, understand, if you're listening to this, that if you feel like the dream and the vision are the same thing, for all practical purposes, keep them the same thing.
Right.
The idea of this conversation is for us to, when we're saying these words,
Right.
so that we know we're on the same page. So as long as we can agree on that, we can continue the conversation with these words and know what we're meaning.
Absolutely. And I think what you're hitting on there too is another key thing is that it's imperative when you're working with somebody, small or large scale, to really define these words, right? Define these pieces before you all kind of jump in and start having a conversation.
Yeah. Actually, here's one thing that I would mention, and you just said define. So one of my mentors, his name is Dax Moy. He's out in the UK, and he has this process that he calls a define, refine, and align.
Okay.
It's a way of, sometimes if you were to ask somebody, what does this mean to you? They can't quite tell you what it is. And so they get stuck.
Sure.
So the define part is, what is this? What is this vision? What is this belief? Whatever it is, what it is. The refine is, what is it not? And I bet, and think about this, sometimes I bet somebody has asked you, what is this? And all you can think of, well, I know it's not this, it's not that, and it's not that.
For sure.
And so essentially going through this process of define, refine, and align is the difference between drawing something that's flat and adding shadow. It, when you add shadow, you all of a sudden bring it to life. It pops up out of the paper. There's depth.
Right.
So by knowing what it is, knowing what it isn't, all of a sudden that starts making it pop out. And then what makes it real is the align part. How will I know if I am doing this? How will I know if I am living this? Right. So it's the living it out part.
Right. Yeah. Let's apply that. Right. Let's apply that kind of to even yourself, right? So you've got a vision, you've got your dreams, and you've defined, you've refined. Now, how is your alignment showing up for you?
That's a great question. So based off what the definition was and based off what it isn't, and I say, okay, well, let's make something concrete. Let's define. Let's take being a husband.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a belief or a definition of what it means to be a husband. Now, by the way, this is my definition. If you have a different one, totally cool. But mine is I need to be someone who provides for my family.
Right.
I also need to be someone who's connected with my wife. Mm-hmm. It's important as a husband for me to understand what she needs so that I can best serve her. It's important for me to communicate with her. So as a husband, these are really important things that I know that I must do if I want to be a good husband.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. The refined part of that is what does it not mean to be a good husband? Well, it means beating my wife. That's not being a good husband.
Right.
Cheating on my wife. That's not being a good husband. Speaking ill of her or putting her down.
Right.
Those are things that are not. So now the aligned part. How will I know if I'm living out this being, okay, well, when I get frustrated with her, instead of lashing out, maybe asking her a question. Okay, I see that you're not in the best place, and I'm tempted to go there.
Right.
How can I best support you?
Right.
Okay. If I know that she likes it when I do the dishes and help around the house, be more proactive in helping around the house, so that I can better support what it is that she needs from me.
Right.
Does that make sense? So like,
right. Yeah.
Different components.
So I mean, you've got you defined what it is for yourself. You in a situation, you refine the situation, and then you do some things that are in alignment with the precursors there. Yeah. No, that works. That absolutely works. And I think that and while it may seem small in scope, that is applicable in every other places, right? Like as we talked about earlier, humans are pattern seeking, and if we see this is a pattern we can invoke that is working in just the smallest piece, we can try this everywhere else. Right. And I think that is also indicative of law of attraction, right? Where we take some things, for example, I think in Abraham Hicks, she does this vortex exercise, right? And she does something very similar though, where, it's called like getting into the vortex or getting into alignment, where you kind of go through the process of what you just said. You said, all right, well, here's where it is, but I'm going to keep stepping. I'm going to keep refining. I'm going to keep refining this until it kind of gets to the place where I feel like I can align to it. Right. And that it's not specifically law of attraction though. Like we just said here, you've got this other thing, define, refine, and align. That is not a law of attraction. That is, living with intention, right? And I think that's something that can be clarified too, is you've got some people to say living with intention or with purpose or follow your bliss, right? Like these are all things that you hear out there. And I think that follow your bliss and that type of thing can be looped back to living an intentional and purposeful life. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, if you could define it that way, yes. And that's where it is. And like this whole thing with the law of attraction, it's a label that we've put to essentially, my understanding of it is, if you're visualizing something, if it's something that's in your consciousness enough,
right,
it's something that can become your reality.
For sure.
Right? For
sure.
But at the same time, thinking about it and not doing anything about it is not going to help.
Right.
We have to understand, and that's where the understanding of things is important, because sometimes we'll get somebody that will, especially when somebody has influence over a large group of people, and they they simplify it to the point where now the person just thinks, oh, I just got to think about it.
Right.
As opposed to really helping the people understand it in the way it's designed, or really how it's really going to help them.
Right. I think so. I saw this, along with Tony Robbins. I saw like all these people, right? This Wealth Expo, and there was a girl in there. Her name was Sarah Prout, who's apparently like big in the LOA place, law of attraction space. But one of the things that she threw out there was, the term inspired action, right? Like you've got your vision, and your vision could be like this motivation, right? The vision could be what wells up in you, kind of like the emotion, the motivation to move forward. Inspired action. Like if you don't take that inspired action, most things aren't going to happen, right? But I mean, it's no different really than any other kind of goal or plan that you set. Is that fair?
Well, I would say it could be. It could be, and here's where I would make a distinction between motivation and inspiration, right? So
sure, yeah.
Inspiration means to quite literally be filled with the Spirit, right? So you're coming from the inside out, and you use the word welling out, which would is in alignment with what inspiration is. It's coming from the inside out.
Right.
Motivation is actually quite the opposite. Motivation is an external force applied to you to do something that you may not really want to do.
Right.
Versus an inspiration is coming from the inside and driving out because it needs to come out of you. This is not a question if this is important to you. It's like, no, this is me.
Right. Let's look back to, if you don't mind, right? Do you feel like this is kind of what happened with you a few years ago? That your purpose had been maybe denied for a moment, where you didn't recognize your purpose for a moment, and you had to go do the thing out. And oh God, where'd you go? Where did you end up going to? Like
Thailand?
Yeah, right. I mean, you ended up going to Thailand, right? Like, I mean, do you feel like you lost direction? Do you feel like you lost sense of purpose? Do you feel like you lost the inspiration for a little bit?
Yes, but remember that loss. Here, let me be specific. For me, that loss came at a loss of clarity.
Sure.
Right? Clarity brings confidence.
I mean, it's tough to get aligned to anything if you don't have any clarity to it, correct? Right. But I mean, would you say that, and listen, we're just kind of having this random conversation, but like what I love about you is that you're familiar with all aspects of this space, right? I know that you've also got a thriving, you're doing well, right? And I want people to see that you can be prosperous and speak this information, but you don't have to be, oh, I got this through law of attraction. Well, what are some other ways you can say it to somebody else and have the conversation, right? And be like, okay, well, and be comfortable with yourself when you're saying it.
Again, that all comes down to learning, right? Mm-hmm. The more you master something,
right,
the more you're able to, number one, explain it. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between when you master something, what other people do doesn't affect you. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to give you in the health space very often. And it's funny because, I've been in the health space. My wife and I have a fitness and physical therapy studio in Miami. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing this already I've been doing it already for 15, 16 years.
Right.
It's funny because, seasonally, let's call it, there's a new magic thing that comes out, whether it's the latest MLM with the latest product or the latest diet. And so what you have is these people who don't understand, mm-hmm. but had a great experience doing something. And now what they're sharing with people is they're experiencing their energy for what they did, but they really have no idea of what is really going on.
Right.
And so what happens is that very often when somebody's trying to convince you that this is the way,
right,
it's because they're trying to remind themselves because they're still trying to master it. And if you throw any other loopholes in there, they can't conceive of that yet. So it's part of the learning process. You're familiar with the 4 stages of learning, the unconscious and
to competent, right? Like, yes, so right.
Unconscious incompetence, then conscious incompetence, then Conscious.
Isn't it like it's incompetent to unconscious, competent to like maybe mastery or something like that, right?
Right.
Is that fair?
Right. So usually what happens is that if you're in the level 1, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Level 2, you know that you don't know this thing yet.
Right.
Level 3, which is where a lot of people end up in, and that's where the learning is still taking place, is that conscious incompetence, where you're aware of it and you're working on it.
Right.
And I'm sorry, conscious competence, where you're working on it, but it is one of those things. The issue is that once you're there, you're still in that learning process, and if somebody tells you something different, you're going to fight because you only have a capacity for so much when you're trying to learn.
Right.
But after you're able to peel back the layers, it doesn't matter if the person says this, because you understand why it, number one, it works for you, or why it's the truth.
Sure.
Because you've mastered this area.
Right.
So understanding when somebody is, let's just say, trying to convince you, I'm going to use the word violently, or extremely, very often it has nothing to do with you, and it has more to do with where they are in their stage of learning.
Sure.
And it's important to do that so that you can better communicate with that person, because if not, the tendency is to fight.
Sure.
Right? Okay.
Right.
All right. If you want to believe that, that's okay.
Right. Right. No, and I think that's huge too. Well, and this is something else I think that comes oftentimes is just like you're saying, when you're in the process of learning something and somebody else comes up and they're trying to teach you something new outside of it, or even in addition to, you can only take so much. Right. But oftentimes, and this has been my experience, maybe 3 or 4 months goes by, maybe years. I mean, as in the case of my parents, right? Like all the things that my parents told me when I was growing up. And then I finally years later, I'm like, oh, that's what they were saying. Right. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
Right. I mean, there's an incubation period, if you want to call that,
yes.
as well as you need to have the repetitions in there.
Right.
The attention to what's going on, the intention to drive into it, and then the repetition to reinforce it. And for some people, some of that happens quickly, but for other people, it takes longer. For sure.
No, that makes sense. I want to bump back a second to, I know that we were talking about vision, inspired action, and I wanted to couple Raz into that. When we believe, or even when we take the Raz, right, we set the new filters. Once we get past survival, we're able to see more, right? We are typically able to say, all right, well, this is my vision. And once I set my vision, now I can see and become open to these opportunities that I may have never seen before. Is that fair?
Yes.
And so how do you talk your guys through that, right? I assume you've got some people that come through and they're like, well, I just don't see this for me. How do you get them to reset and open up like that?
Okay. So that's a perfect example, right? Sometimes you can see in other people what they can't see for themselves. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And you can share that, but if they're not at that place, it doesn't matter if you scream it from the rooftops, it's not going to connect. Mm-hmm. So it's important for you to stand shoulder to shoulder to actually see what they can see. Mm-hmm. Because while you can see what they can't,
right,
you need to be able to see what they can, so that then you can get them to the next closest spot that they can see.
Right.
And if they're a little bit further ahead on that, now maybe they can see a little bit further.
Sure.
And go from there. Because in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, well, look, from a big picture, I can really see this happening for you.
You're there.
But
right.
You're not there yet. You're not there mentally. You can't see that far.
Right. So in a coaching and client environment, the coach can totally see that the person's really there. It's just that they've got to see it for themselves. And it's the small. This is where people talk about you've got to build that momentum, right? You got to take these small steps. You got to crawl, walk, and run.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say, and again, this is another one of these distinctions as far as what is the role of or how would you define the role of a mentor versus a coach versus a consultant?
Oh, yeah.
And to me, they're all very different things, right? Sure. So a consultant will basically, let me rephrase that. A consultant, based off the way I would define it, would be somebody who comes into a situation, analyzes it, and gives a prescription for how to improve it.
Right.
A mentor is essentially somebody that says, I've done what you like to do, do what I do, and you'll get what I get.
Right. Walk this way.
Right. A coach is essentially opening doors that you never saw that were there and inviting you to either go in or go out. In other words, it's helping you make the decision, but with the path that perhaps you didn't know. In other words, shining light where there's darkness, not darkness. Sure. Shining light where there's darkness. Right. Bringing certainty and clarity to a situation so that you can take the decision that best resonates with you. Right.
Look, I 100% agree that, and I love it how you laid it out, but, coach helps you just to see what you kind of already know and help you to express yourself, right? Get to those places. I always say, man, like, you can't see the back of your own head. Sometimes you're too close to it, right? Sometimes you're too close to the source of all the things that are going on. And you're just like, you're in the weeds, right? Like, I mean, I worked in the restaurants forever. Like, you got a busy night and the kitchen's going crazy. You're in the weeds, man. You can't get your head out. And a coach is able to come in, and they're objective too, right? And that's the other part too. They don't have like, a 20-year relationship with you to know all the crap that you did 20 years ago. But like, I don't know. Remember that time 20 years ago, we were all at the bar. This might not be for you. Right. So I think that's another part that's great. I love how you broke down the distinction though. A consultant can give a prescription, basically. A mentor is like, listen, this is I do well in this one thing. If you do what I do, you're going to get my results. Right. And a coach is, like we just described, is able to get you to kind of see through some other options that you weren't even aware that were available to you before.
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you. I mean, look, I've hired many coaches and mentors throughout my life. And I will tell you that my success with mentors, the way I've defined, right? And this is important, the way I've defined it has rarely been good. And not because they weren't any good. Right. But because it didn't align with the vision that I want. Like, I do things a certain way. I don't do things other ways. And very often what was true for them wasn't a way that I really resonated with. I didn't align with it. I'm like, every time I would go and do it, I felt like, no, this is just not me. Right. And it wasn't that that's the only way to do it. It was just the only way that they knew how to do it. So that's why they could instruct me. They were there to basically say, hey, do what I do and you'll get what I get, except I didn't like the journey. Sure. And that's a big part for me that's important.
Well, I think this will wrap back into taking the inspired motivation, right? Taking the inspired action versus the motivation. Like, maybe you were motivated externally to do better, greater in your business, but the actions weren't inspired and you just weren't able to, like you're saying here, resonate with them. And I think that's, talk a little bit about that, right? Because to me, that's what it sounds like. To me, it sounds like you would rather take the inspired action versus this prescribed action, right?
Yeah. And again, this also has to do with how you operate.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I operate a very, very different way than my wife does. And granted, one of the things that's really important is what are your values? And the clearer you are on that, then what are your values and what are your beliefs? When you're clear on that, right, then that becomes the map and compass to let you know what, this method that they're teaching me is totally out of alignment with my map and compass. That's like, this is my true north. Sure. Yeah. Right. So it's and it doesn't have to be you're doing something illegal. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. That usually is, all right, at that point, you already know. That shouldn't be for me. Right. Right.
We're not doing business at the Gentleman's Club.
Right. There's certain things, but so then there's certain beliefs. Sure. And certain, like, for me, I'll give you an example. For me, my values can be summed up in 3 words: love, light, and creator. If I'm in alignment with those love, light, and creator, everything flows. Right. So to me, those 3 words encompass all my values. Yeah. And if I understand what those are for me, right, then all of a sudden I'm working in alignment. I know that I am moving in the direction that I have. Right. And I share that because that's one of the things that I work on with my clients is I've had people come to me, oh yeah, I know my values, and they show up with like a 3-page document that are like long sentences. That's beautiful, but that is not a tool you can wield. It's
Right.
cumbersome for you to use on a day-to-day basis because it's just too much.
Right.
All those 3 pages, I have them in the scope of those 3 words.
Sure.
But I know that if I can use, like, in other words, if I can quickly go through it, love, like, creator, are these in line with this decision? Yes, I can do it.
Right.
No, I don't do it. I don't have to go through 3 pages of stuff because in that word, all of that is encompassed.
No, and that's fair, right? And I think that in most coaches, and I'm not aware of, like, I don't see a consultant doing like a values exercise. I don't see a mentor really doing a values exercise. But in coaching, I think that's one of the precursors, right? We sit down and we work with each other to say, where are your values? The elicitation, right? Like, and that happens through conversation. It happens through conversation, and then like we're able to kind of again define, refine, and align. Just like you're saying, I'm gonna tell people it came from you. I'm about to check out Dax One myself, but that's what it is, right? And those 3 words that you've got, more went into that than just picking out of the ether, right? These are the 3 words, right? You know what I mean? So there's probably 3 pages and or more, a lifetime behind those 3 words for you, right? So and this is just said because if somebody's out there and they're like, well, I've got my values and they're listed, Armando, what should I do? And so what is the first thing you tell them to do when they bring that 3-pager to you?
I said, it's great that you know this. It's only going to help. Mm-hmm. But now let's use it. Let's make it a tool that you can use. Yeah. Because that's what happens. Most people have 3 pages or whatever, 1 page of this cumbersome value statement. Right. But that's all it is. It stays up on a wall and it never gets used. Right. At least not consciously. Right. What I'm saying is these are your compass. And if you can't use this to get the directions that you need, then you're at a disadvantage. Right. Right? How would you like to feel more confident making decisions? How would you like to feel more certain that you're headed in the right direction? I mean, most of my clients, that's one of the things that they're after, right? As a coach, I provide clarity, direction, support, and focus. If I can provide any one of those 4 things or all 4 of those things in any session, I've done my job as a coach. Does that make sense?
Look, so to me, Armando, it sounds like what we do is let me make sure I got the right audio. That's what I want. All right, cool. Sounds to me like I'm in the rough, right? It's raw materials, right? And there's something that you bring in the 3-pager and you help them refine it. You give them something they can really polish up or cut into multiple facets and really kind of show off. And you're also saying, like, turn it into their compass, right? Give them some kind of direction. It would be like trying to lead or walk through a city with the whole atlas, right? Like trying to, instead of just like 1 page of the map, right? Or 1 page of the city.
Right. It's a great analogy. Yeah. Okay. What's a more useful tool at that point?
Right. So, and it's always great to have like the big story, right? Like, it'd be fun to like maybe sit down with, your kids. If you've got like the 3-pager, be like, here's our values, kids, this is what, this is what goes behind it. But, like you're saying, in a moment's notice, you can sit there and be like, all right, well, I know that my values are love, creator. And what was the last one?
And light.
That's what I thought it was, but want to double check. So love, creator, and light, and I say it's this aligned to that. And it's really easy for you to say, hey, yes or no. I love that, man. I love that. I wouldn't have pegged you for a love, creator, and light kind of guy. That's great. So, and this is, I think, let's just whittle down to this last piece, right? Because, in the law of attraction, in the manifestation, in the all this other space, right? There's that word manifest. There's that word create, and all these other things. And I think that it's very important for you to create the life that you want to live, right? And be the creator of your own life, and not necessarily make it so nebulous where like, well, I just called these things from the ether and they showed up, so here's my world, right? But because I think one of the things that gets left out of life lessons is creation outside of artwork, right? Right. And just how powerful it is to create something in your life and create your own life. Let's talk a little bit about what creation and creator mean to you. I'm curious.
All right. So I love this topic because this is at its core, one of the things that really like bring me alive. And that is exactly like you said. Most people think, oh, creator, or like to create something, and they're thinking either you're physically making something, whether it's a piece of artwork or a piece of furniture, and that is part of it. That actually is one thing. Like, my days must consist of creating something.
Right.
If I don't, I feel off.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like my day has lost a level of meaning.
Absolutely.
But let me share what creating means. So I physically create things. I love tinkering. I don't know if you've ever seen any of my stuff, but I learning how to make a knife yesterday, or a few weeks ago. I found an old BB gun from when I was a kid, and so I was trying to teach my kids how to shoot it.
Right.
But my 5-year-old, the stock for it is too big.
Sure.
I had a piece of mahogany in my garage,
Right.
and I made a brand new stock, and I fit it, and now he can shoot fine.
That's awesome.
I love doing those things.
Right.
I also like doing art, and I design different things. But there are other ways to create moments in time, create emotion, create connection. Those now kind of dig a little bit deeper. Those are a little bit more under the surface, that you don't need to be an artist to do those. You just need to have that.
To be fair, there's got to be, do you believe or not that there's an artistry to that?
There is, but here's why I make that distinction, is that very often people are like, I'm not artistic, so I don't draw. And so the idea of creating art, that's what it is. Right. What I'm saying is that, yes, are there people, and I feel like, in all honesty, that's one of my gifts, is to be able to feel and hear what is not being said, and provide an environment of safety, and for a person to be able to draw that out from them, so that now they don't have to carry it around with them. Right. Yes, there's a skill to that. There's also an inherent talent to that. Sure. Right? Yeah. Like with anything, you're going to have people that are more natural than others, but we all have an ability to listen. Sure. Right? We all have an ability to create an environment for other people that makes it okay for them to express themselves. Right. We all have the ability to express love and gratitude to others. That is creating a moment. That is making an actual impact on the life of somebody else. We all have the ability to smile at someone. Right. Something as simple as that. Yes. So yes, while there is a talent thing, right, and what you'll find is that people that are more talented in that will tend to kind of go in that direction, as far as maybe doing things that align them with that, because we're naturally drawn to them. Right. Right. Well, I think that it's really easy to smile at somebody. It's really easy, but not everybody does it. Right. And it's really easy to see when you smile at somebody, as I just happened earlier today. I saw somebody coming out the door. I opened it and I smiled at the lady. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And her whole face and demeanor changed. And and it's like you say, you create these moments, and you create these connections. In that moment, I felt like I wouldn't say we were connected for forever, but in just a moment, we were connected. Right, where we had that moment where we shared it, and that moment was created. Like you're saying, it's a skill, and I think that. Yes, everybody can do it. Not everybody is aware of just the impact that can have on somebody, though, right? And in certain way, and in certain ways, there is an artistry to it. In the fact that listen, you gotta. I'm not amazing. I'm not an amazing listener, Armando. That's my wife will tell you, and I know it. I know that I'm not an amazing listener, but I have improved, right? And it's kind of what is the intention of listening, right? And historically, I've been the listener to see how I can answer this next question, right? I got to jump in. I got something for this. Versus, all right, I want to be present. What is for example, what is Armando really trying to convey here, right? Like what is at the end of the thought, not the sentence. What's at the end of the completed thought, or just listening and being quiet and providing somebody, like you were saying, with that safe space. And that is what I'm hearing you say is a created moment. That is what living creatively, right? Yes, to be a creator, and that's when I say that. I mean, so this is a conscious thing.
Right. Yeah.
We all do it.
Right.
We all do it, whether good or bad, right? Because we create good moments, we create bad ones.
For sure.
The point is are you making a conscious effort to create this?
Right.
It's part of my value system. It's something I seek to do. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. What I'm saying is that we're all capable of it. And you use the word, the intention behind it. It's not that you get it perfect, but if you have the intention, I think part of it is, and we've been so conditioned to thinking that we need to have the answer.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And realize that there are so many people that don't do this, not because they're adverse to helping someone or to providing that for them, but because they're stuck in their own stuff right now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And they can't get out of that.
Right.
And that's part of this conversation of like, okay, well, maybe you're in that place of threat.
So, I mean, look, you talked earlier about not being, if you can't create a moment in a day, if you can't create in a day, it's something's been taken away from you. And this is where we get down to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, I mean, you've gotten to a certain level. I just had this conversation earlier. It was funny, but like we get to a certain point where like now, you know, I feel like, you know, I feel similar to you, right? If I don't create something in the day, if I don't add value to somebody's life, if I don't create a moment or something in my household, I feel like something's gone terribly awry, right? I feel like, you know, I feel like something's missing, and it's you know, that it's not like detrimental, but like I feel that it's missing, right? Like on a day like where you don't get a good workout, right? On a day where like you don't have a good meditation, on a day like where you know you're just not firing at all cylinders. You're like, oh my god, I hit the head, you know, my head hits the pillow. I'm like, it wasn't a bad day, but man, I didn't really get to create like the maximum moment that I was looking for.
Right. And by the way, that happens 1 or 2 days. It's not a big deal.
Right.
The problem is now, are you acknowledging, is this continuing a pattern? Because now that really starts shifting your life in a different direction. And that's what I mean about being creator. It's, yes, are you always going to get it right? No. There are days that it didn't happen. It's usually the days that I'm behind a computer all day. And then I'm like, I haven't had any meaningful conversations. Why? Because I've been stuck behind a computer all day.
Sure. And you know, and you said earlier too, it's a conscious decision, and otherwise you're living kind of by default, right? We talk about like, you know, this default living. The default living is just everything's kind of set to automatic until, you know, where do you think you may have realized, and I think that this is all also part of the law of attraction, or becoming woke, or just becoming conscious of your actions, you know, really being cognizant. And to me, I think sounds to me like you found it definitely at a younger age, and you're still younger than me, so you found it at a younger age anyways, where you know, you're able to quite literally stop and think about the things that are happening in your life. And it's a lot like watching like the Sherlock Holmes, you know, movies, right? They're like, you know, all these things are happening. You're able to see all these things, and then you do the right thing, or you do what you feel like is best for you in that moment. But you're conscious and you think about that move right before you take it.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I feel like here, it's very easy. Like, we'll have that conversation right now.
Right.
And if somebody's listening, you know, somebody's listening to me, maybe they're not in a good place. And they're like, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, there's not.
Right. There's not. And here's the distinction. So we talked about the woo-woo stuff, right?
Sure.
So this is a way of bringing the woo-woo stuff to neuroscience.
Sure.
And I think it's important because you're going to have listeners that are more science and more woo, so let's combine them.
Absolutely. That's what this conversation is all for, man. That's why you're here today.
So the neuroscience behind that.
Right.
When our brain is in threat, we downshift to our reptilian brain, right? So we have 3 brains, essentially. We have our most primal, which is our reptilian brain, which is designed for us to stay alive, right?
Right.
It's going to fight, flight, freeze. It's going to have you procreate. That's what it's making sure that you're safe.
Right.
You have shelter. You got the basic necessities for the species to move forward.
Right.
That's what that brain is entitled for. If you're in that place because you can't figure out how to pay the bills, you're, you know, something happened with your family, somebody's really sick, you're in this really, really dark place, you don't have access to your human brain. And I'll get to that in a second, because the human brain is what allows us to think and forward project.
Right.
right? So if we have a reptilian brain, the next one up, we said there was 3. So the one in the middle is what's called the mammalian brain. That's the one that's in charge of keeping us in a tribe. That's the one that is like the social stuff. Hey, that person looked at me weird. They must hate me. No, they just, you don't know what's going on. But like your brain starts assessing threat.
Right.
Like, hey, is this person going to kill me? Right? Most of the times, that's a no.
Right.
But that's also the same, like when you ever get that weird feeling, like you walk into a place, you're like, something's not right in here.
Right.
You don't know what it is.
Right.
There's nothing physically that you can see.
Right.
But you sense it.
Right.
That brain is on full alert. Listen to it. Get out. Because there is probably something there that you can't physically see, but it's going to be bad for you.
Right.
That brain is responsible for keeping us cohesive in a group, but also hierarchy. This person is my boss and this person is it. So it's responsible for that whole dialogue going back and forth there.
Right.
And then finally, we have the human brain. That's the one that allows us to create and visualize.
Right.
I make this distinction because if you are in either one of the animal brains, the mammal brain or the reptilian brain, you cannot think of your vision.
Right.
You cannot create that vision at that moment.
Right.
Think about when most people create their vision and the way they like their life to be. Right. It's not when they're in the depth of this. You can't think there.
Well, that's it, right? Like, and that's where it's you. And so this is where I don't know all the neuroscience behind it, but I do know that you've restricted, right? You've restricted down to base level, right? You don't feel safe in this scenario. You don't feel willing, or you don't see this for your own safety in this scenario. So you're not going to move forward in it because you've got all these. This is where fear plays the part, right? Where you like, especially in getting uncomfortable, because again, like you said, we are we want to be efficient, right? And if we approach something that we're not familiar with, it's going to take more processing. Well, we're safe and we're warm and we're eating right here. Why would you go 2 feet to the left over here?
Right.
And you'd be like, well, I don't know if there's gold over there or not. And if there's gold over there, then we could really be eating well. And the other guy's like, but there's gators in between us, so I don't know if that's a good idea, right? Even though there's no, like, it's not, look, I mean, that, and this is just like, obviously, just kind of exploded out there, but that's our brain just trying to keep us safe, right? And but if we're already safe and we like, you know what, it's worth the risk. I've got something to gain, and that's where we start to explore and expand. This is where the term, to me, expansion comes from. We're like, okay, let's just start thinking with the other brain for a second. What happens if Tim Ferriss has the fear setting thing, right? We're like, all right, what's the worst possible thing that could happen to you in this scenario? Think about that, and if you're probably going to live through that, what is the best outcome? What's the best? And if the best outcome is like this awesome, amazing thing, and the worst outcome is like zero legacy, for example, as a legacy coach, I mean, how do you play that out? I mean, that's a good question, right? Like, I mean, so if the opportunity is legacy or zero legacy, I mean, how do you, safety or legacy?
Well, and that's going to depend on a few things, right? Mm-hmm. So here's, and I think it's important for us to explain this because you're going to find yourself in one of these camps, and the tendency is that people make blanket statements, and then if you don't fall in there, you're like, there's either something wrong with me or I'm never going to reach this.
And one more thing, I'm going to interject this one last time. That's because we live in an all or nothing society, right? Like, and so we got to be able to say, a little bit of everything. Is that, I mean, just, right? So
yeah. So to a point, that fear setting exercise is a great example,
right? But
you cannot do that exercise properly if you're in an animal brain. Mm-hmm. Okay. You can only take that challenge when you're in the human brain. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that you're in grave danger all the time. Sometimes people can still be in human brain under grave danger. Sure. It's just where you are. If you're finding that you can't access this, there's a good chance you're a little down there in the animal brains.
Sure.
So first and foremost, understand that in order to create that fear setting exercise, you have to be in a good place.
Sure.
Also, when you create goals, you create goals when you're in a good place. Think about the biggest difference, and it's funny because the premise behind my next book that I'm writing now is most people create goals when they're in a good place, and so they're overconfident in what they can do. They don't set it for when they're at their worst.
Right.
So the premise behind the book is based around one rule: is what could you do even on your worst day?
Yeah.
Right. What are those actions?
Yes.
And so if you look at that, that's designed to help you succeed even when you are on your worst days.
Yeah.
So you maintain that momentum and you're still moving forward.
Yeah.
Most people say, hey, I'm going to work out 2 hours in the gym every single day. That's their goal. Okay,
Right.
wait. Let's really think about this. What happens if you get sick? What happens
Right.
when you're on vacation? What happens if you get injured?
Sure.
What happens if nobody sleeps in the house and you're up all night and you don't have access to a gym? Now,
Sure.
like you haven't created a plan that's sustainable and sustainably successful long term.
Sure.
It's just in the moment. And that's what happens when people say, oh, life happened. No, life didn't happen. It's just you didn't plan for life the way it was gonna happen.
Sure.
Right?
No, yeah, I like that too. And I love that. I love that. Do you want to go ahead and just share like those three things, because it's the three things that you can do even on your worst day, and kind of lead out with that?
Yeah, well, and then the other component of that is, are you a leading towards person or a going away person, right? Some of us are wired. I am that person. I love new things. I love adventure. I love the unknown.
Right.
So I'm a going toward, like if you give me the thing, oh, stay with where you are,
Right.
or look at the potential there, I'm like, I'll cross that ridge.
Sure.
I'll go for it.
Yeah.
My wife is the opposite, right?
Right.
So that's what I said. It helped for me. By the way, this caused a lot of friction at the beginning until
Sure.
we started understanding each other more. And then we're like, okay, this is what I need to communicate to you.
Right.
And then she knew that this is what I need to communicate. And this is the way we need to communicate it, right? But as far as you just asked me a question and I just drew a blank.
Oh, the three things, right? Like, so I mean, look, I think that covers a lot of what people would either say woo woo or law of attraction. I think all these components fall under that umbrella. It's just how do you have that conversation, right? Like, you and I are comfortable kind of having that conversation and getting there. But if I go talk to somebody in an office, I'm not going to be like, well, I just manifest things and that's just how I do. And, because that's not going to be, so, I mean, in looking at what is all in there. And again, coming from your best place too, it's a challenge if all you're doing is working this, as you were saying, in the mammalian or reptilian brain, because you're just focused on survival. You're not focused on how can I be truly successful beyond this, right? And so I think that's a lot of what you're talking about, right? And being in the best place. Sometimes people build out like, I'm going to do this. Like, I mean, the 2 hours of exercise every day. It's good right now where you're at, but can you do that forever? And that's where I like the whole idea. I'm sure you're a Hal Elrod kind of guy, or at least you're familiar with the Morning Miracle. There's a 6-minute version, right, of that, where just about anybody can do every day. You can have 1 minute vision, you can have 1 minute of exercise, you can have one movement, right? And it doesn't have to be, I did 100 squats. It's just some movement, right? And so, what is the base minimum I can do and still be successful and still count that as working towards the life that I'm creating?
Right.
Is that fair? So yeah. I love that. I love it. So tell us what the three things are. I mean, do you want to give any highlights on the book coming up? Do you want to hit on that at all?
I can. I mean, at its core is essentially using that rule and the power of micro habits. Mm-hmm. And the micro habits really are that. I mean, it's based off of almost 4 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago, I didn't like where the consistency in my life. I was just very sporadic. I work out here, I work out there, and I didn't like it. There were other things that I wanted to improve. So I decided that I would do six little habits, and they were meditate for 40 breaths. Okay, so I just basically sit down, take 40 breaths. That's it. I would do 10 minutes of movement, and this is the way I define movement: moving my body in such a way that would energize, excite, and leave me better. That may be walking one day, that may be running another day, that may be lifting, that may be stretching, that may be yoga, that whatever it is, but moving my body in a way that energizes, excites, and leaves me better than before. So that was the second one. The third one write 50 words every day. Like sit down and actually write 50 words in like a cohesive paragraph. Number 4, make a video every day. And I mean, I can go into each one of those if you want, but the point is that was number 4. Number 5, read 5 pages in a book. And number 6, connect with 3 people every single day. So those 6 things, I started doing them. And at first I was like, can I do these for 30 days? And I got to 30 days. I was like, oh, let me see if I can extend it. And then I got to 60 days. And then I was like, oh, maybe I can go to 90. When I got to 90, I was like, oh, can I do this for a year? So I did it for a year. Then I did them for 2 years without missing a day. Then I did it for 2 years. And at about 2 years, I started saying, okay, well, how has this benefited me? Well, the meditation brought me closer to my spiritual practices. I'm Catholic, and it's helped me open up doors to studying a little bit more and going into that with my family and leading my family in that way. The movement, well, the movement led to 30 minutes of running extra. So I still had my 10 minutes, and I said, oh, what would happen if I tried to run 30 minutes every day? And I tried that for 30 days, and then 60 days. And then a year later, that built up that I ran my first 100-miler. But it started with 2 years of doing 10 minutes.
Right.
Right? The writing 50 words, I was exhausted writing 50 words at the beginning. And I built up the conditioning to write more, and I wrote my first book. It became a bestseller, The Legacy Code. Amazing.
Yes.
I never thought in my life I could do that. I wanted to become a better speaker, but I have 3 kids, and I have a wife that I want to be with. So I always heard that if you want to be a better speaker, you have to get on more stages than anyone else. But I said, well, number 1, I'm not traveling all over the place because that means I'm not with them. So I created my own stage. My own stage is my video. So every day I make at least 1 video. Some of them I share, some of them I don't. But I get in front of the camera and I speak, right? Connecting with 3 people. Connecting with 3 people serves a function of me feeling connected with people, which is important to me. Right. It's also helped grow my business. Right. It's also helped me serve a lot of people in that process. And then the final one is read 5 pages. Well, in this process, I don't know how many books I've read as a result of it, but it's part of who I am in that growth process. Yeah. So the whole idea of the concept behind the book is all those things, 40 breaths, 10 minutes of movement, and with those rules that it was flexible enough what movement meant. Right. Writing 50 words, running, making a video, connecting with people, all those things I could do if I was sick in bed. If I was injured, I could do them. Now, when I started moving it up where I was running every day, that I knew wasn't still in alignment with that, but I understood that going in there. I was still doing the other stuff. Right. But it built up to that. Nice. And leading up, even the day that I ran the 100-miler, which started at 6 a.m., I still did my 6 things. Nice. In the morning before. Nice. And then I took 4 days off. I said, you know what? Mentally and physically, I took 4 days off of not doing any of them after the 100-miler. Right. And I've been doing them ever since. I love it. I love it. And I think that's really important, right? The power of kind of like these micro habits, and then how do they play out in your life? And dude, I love your story, man. I love that you've taken some time here and shared a little bit more with me, kind of like how you're approaching some of these other thoughts and these processes. And again, as I was learning about law of attraction, you were the first person that came out and you taught me about the reticulating activating system, right? And really kind of flipped my script and just helped me to understand that we have the ability to set our own filters, right? We have the ability to say, all right, well, sure, some things are going to kind of happen automatically. Like you said, if you drive the car, you get in this weird vehicle, you're going to see them everywhere, right? But sometimes we can say, this is the filter. This is what I want to do. This is my intention. These are the values. I'm going to define, I'm going to refine, and I'm going to align, right? But like that's setting your filters, your intentions, and when you kind of see these things, you would have otherwise been cut off, especially in your mammalian brain, right? Like how do you rise, get these to kind of get these beyond your mammalian brain, right? Getting beyond those, and you do that
by doing some of these things that you're talking about. Don't set so what I'm hearing you to say too is don't set things that are unachievable, because then you're giving yourself a reason to beat yourself up. Right? Put yourself down, and you're really just, life is, for lack of better terminology, it's about rising up, right? It's about being light. I don't know if that's what your intention of light and shining your light, right? And so we can't shine our light if we're living our darkest moments.
Correct. And by the way, that's part of the power of having a coach like
right.
you or me or anyone who's a coach is, our human brain, our prefrontal cortex. That's one of the advantages when you're in that dark place and you've hired a coach.
Yeah.
You get the benefit of borrowing their prefrontal cortex, because now they can ask you questions to help bring you out of that darkness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually share that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so sometimes people are like, oh yeah, but if I'm here, how do I get out?
Right.
Well, can you do it by yourself? Yes.
Yes.
Part of the reason I have those little micro habits is because they bring stability and certainty to your life,
right.
which help raise you up from that darkness, because it's something you can count on. Right. But having a coach helps speed up that process.
Yeah, fast tracks it. I mean, really, I love how you said that you're borrowing somebody else's human brain. I certainly never thought about it that way. And that's what inspired me to become a coach, was being coached. I had a coach. I was like, oh my God, this is you really get to help somebody really see the best of themselves and what it is that they're capable of. And I think that's the allure for me of being a coach, right? Like the allure isn't well, how can I go become Tony Robbins? I'm no interest in becoming Tony Robbins. The allure for me is to say, how can I help you become, who you want to become? How can I help you, get out of the animal mind, right? I don't think I'd ever be like, hey, listen, it looks like you're in the animal mind. I can help you get out of there. But who knows, man? Look, there's somebody out there, I'm sure, who's probably, that's his slogan. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this great insight. I think it's a really wonderful conversation that's going to help a lot of people out there that, tune in and catch this one. Where should I send people to go check out Armando Cruz? What's Armando Cruz got going right now that people can either check in on and connect? Yeah,
I think the best place, or the best two places, would probably be legacycodebook.com. You can go check out the book, but you can also see a lot of different components of that. I did a virtual book tour for the year afterwards, and I had, almost 30 some interviews with different podcasts. And I think one of the beauties of that was, number one, there's access to it there. Right. I linked each one. But then number two, each interviewer asked, and we went in such different ways. So it's not like, oh, tell me about the book, and that's it. It's like, oh, they chose one area, and we were kind of diving in, and we went through all these different paths. So now, if you listen to all of them, you could really get a deeper understanding without even reading the book. Now, granted, the book is it's designed to be almost a manual to walk you through creating that legacy, purposely and powerfully creating that legacy that you want, right? For sure. So legacycodebook.com. You could also go to the hub of everything, which is armandocruz.com. And those will be the two places. I'm on social media, Instagram, all that. But you can find all those links if you go to either one of those two sites. So awesome, brother. Thanks again for stopping on today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening today. And remember, reach out to us on Facebook or through our webpage. The Prosperity Practice. The Prosperity Practice. Have something to say directly? Hit us up, Brandon at prosperity-practice.com. Prosperity is a result of action. Take action.
That's it. I'm out of here.